Okay, Gina, I've got to ask you about this one. You've mentioned Maasai, NBA. That's something that you became super passionate about. You've been 1 minute you're telling us you don't know about sports. The next thing you're telling us you're supporting
like
African
I said,
NBA.
God has an incredible sense of humor, because I didn't know anything about sport. And then one day Nathan comes to me, and he's kind of a young guy, and he says, "Hey, Mom, Luol Deng's in town." And I'm like, "Huh? Who?" And he's like, "Mom, Luol." I'm like, "Okay, I don't know him. And who is he?" And he's like, "Oh, he's from South Sudan. He's playing for the Bulls, and he's just awesome. And I really want to meet him." And I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? How do I do this? And of course, I then figure out who else I know, and I call Emmanuel Jumbo. And I'm like, "By the way, do you know this guy, Luol Deng?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's in town. I'm like, "Okay, I need to get my son to meet him." And anyway, Emmanuel arranges it. We go to the Norfolk.
And let's also say that you have done a lot of work with Emmanuel.
Oh yeah, I love Emmanuel.
For years.
For years. Emmanuel's he's my guy. And so we go to the Norfolk, and I figured we're going to meet some diva, one diva basketball star. And Luol's there, obviously towering above all of us. And I say, "Oh, it's really nice to meet you." And he looks straight at Nathan, and we sit down, and he moves around to make sure that he's sitting next to Nathan, which was like, I was so touched by his sensitivity that actually this is the kid that wants to meet him. It's not me, and he spent his whole dinner focused on Nathan.
Whoa.
And I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is a really amazing, and I was not sure about sports then. I was like, oh, all these guys are divas, at this and that. And here was a guy, an African guy who really cared about the continent and cared about young Africans getting into sport. And he spent his whole time talking to Nathan. And I thought we'd be there for 15 minutes, we'd do the photograph, and we'd leave. 3 hours later, we were still there, and that was because of Luol. He wanted us to be there for that long. He was just focused on Nathan. It was just wonderful. And we kept in touch, and every year he would, he would come, and Nathan and him would always do this photograph of them to see how tall Nathan had got compared to him. And it just became like a tradition. And a few years later, the NBA were going to play in Africa, in Johannesburg. And Nathan's like, "Mom, I really want to go." And I said, "Well, maybe, Luol can take you as an intern." And Nathan was like, "Oh my God, would that be possible?" So I called Luol, and I'm like, Nathan was still quite young. I said, and he's like, "Sure, he can come for the month." So Nathan went off to Johannesburg, and Luol was incredible, really incredible. He took care of Nathan. Nathan was carrying his bag, and he was really being like his PA. It was very sweet. And I went for the game. By the time I got there, Nathan said to me, "Mom, you're not going to believe who else is here." And I said, "Who?" He said, "Maasai Ujiri." And I'm like, "Okay, you tell. Okay, if you say so." And I was like, "Well, who is Maasai?" And he said, "That's who I want to be in the football world. I want to be the Maasai." And I'm like, okay. So by the time I got there, Maasai already had taken Nathan in. They were already chatting. And I went and introduced myself, and he was so kind and so nice. But that first experience in South Africa was, for me, a game changer in the way I looked at sport. And particularly young Africans that have, gone on to become these incredible stars, and the care they have for the continent. We got to meet all of them, like literally Dikembe Mutombo, Hakeem. Literally everybody was there.
Yeah, you know them now.
Yeah, I did. But we had this African dinner, and you could hear their stories and what they were doing in their countries, in Senegal, and of course Amadou, who ran NBA Africa and is now the president of the Basketball Africa League. But what passion, what passion and what kindness, and just. So after that, we've been to every All-Star game.
Yep.
And Maasai then had Nathan go over to Toronto for a month and spend time with the Raptors. And, and Nathan came back a changed person. And he said to me, "I want to be like Maasai, not just professionally, but as the family man that he is."
Whoa. Because
he cares so much about women and girls, and he wants to make the world a better place for them. And Maasai is a very passionate African, and I've done a lot of work with Maasai in projects where he's put in money, like the Samburu Girls Center, where he put in running water for the girls, and he cares deeply.
Or Sauti Kuu, where he put in the basketball.
And then Sauti, that wasn't even a question. When I called him and said, by the way, I need a basketball court. It's a big investment. And he's like, of course. He didn't even know that Barack Obama was opening it. He just said, of course. There wasn't even a question, and he put in the money and we built it. And of course, when Barack came,
he played some hoops,
and didn't even turn around because he knew that ball was going to go in. He was so smooth in doing it. It was incredible. So basketball has had a huge impact on our lives, on the life of Nathan, and on me personally, in that I've got to experience Africa in a way that has been fascinating to see that actually, you have these young role models that young Africans can look up to. And I'm so excited by the Basketball Africa League and seeing them play in Kigali. I'm hoping to go this weekend to go and spend some time with them. But it's just, for me, it's been, and I say this, my children have given me so much that I didn't learn at school. Like Natalia in her literature, she's able to break it down for me to where I can because she said to me one day, she said, oh, have you heard of this? And I didn't. And she would explain that, that he was the first person in the world that traveled for fun. And, it would be somebody in like 1600s or something. But, she was able to break it down. So I've had so much experience from my kids. And I'm so grateful for that.
Mentorship downwards. I had somebody once say that.
100%.
Just because you brought up sports, I'm trying to think about it from a Kenyan perspective. What is it that we need to do to get to that level?
I think, it's all management and leadership. We really need to put, the sports ministry shouldn't be given to somebody as a punishment. It shouldn't be that, and I think that's the thing. It's that it should be a ministry that people look forward to being there. And people who get appointed to that job shouldn't feel bad that we only got Ministry of Sports, because I think sports is the next big thing for the continent. And we need to be there to compete. Look what Kigali is doing.
I know.
For me, Rwanda is incredible. They built that. I've been to that arena. Nathan and I went to that arena. It is amazing. Why can't we, and that's what bothers me, why can't we do all these things? Why can't we make Kenya the sports hub of the continent? I went to Dakar for a game. It was amazing. Obviously South Africa, we really need to realize the importance, and people need to invest in sports. I think that's the other thing, is that there has to be investment in sports. Okay. And what, as Kenyans, we're investing in all sorts of things. Why can't we invest in sports? We have to, because if not, we're going to get left behind. I've got Nathan, he's just finishing his third master's. His third degree. His second master's in football, what is there for him to do if he comes back here? And there again, we have the brain drain of somebody that's highly qualified. But, what will he be able to do here? So obviously he's going to work internationally. I know. And
then use that influence to open up doors for us here.
I hope so. I hope that he'll be encouraged to do that. I hope that, Kenya will be able to encourage Kenyans that want to do that and provide them with the facilities to do that. There's so much land lying around. Yep. Why can't we do partnerships with government to create these facilities? And we've got tourism as an added. People would come for sports and safaris.
Talking about, Gina, the problem when we start going down this rabbit hole, questions just come. Tourism. You've talked about tourism. I'm thinking about Richard Branson coming and investing in tourism in Kenya. So, and that's somebody I know that you've worked with, and also Najib, that's somebody that you've worked with. Let's talk a little bit about tourism from your perspective.
So I think Kenya is such a beautiful destination, right? Everybody, when you talk to...
And you've traveled.
And I've traveled. I've traveled. We live in a beautiful country, and beautiful by any standard that you could look at. I've been to Hawaii. I've been to, our beaches here are as beautiful, if not more. But, the thing is, we always get into the situation where we end up with politics. And I think that's the problem, is that, we need to create incentives for tour operators. We need to create incentives for hoteliers so that they can carry on investing, because we have such a beautiful country, such a beautiful destination, and we need to make the process faster. I mean, we need, the visa on arrival is a good thing, but the whole experience of arriving at the airport has to be a nicer one. We have to improve what our airport looks like. The whole experience of landing here has to start with that experience. Otherwise, people just end up going to Masai Mara, but the experience starts from landing. I grew up in the hospitality industry, as family, and I just think there is so much to give as a country. And I don't think we're making full use of what we could offer the world in terms of an experience. We just need to make it easier. It just needs to be a lot easier than it is to come to Kenya. So I hope we get there. I mean, obviously COVID has had a huge impact on the tourism and the hospitality sectors. I hope we pick up. But, again, as soon as we pick up, we'll be going into election year or something again. And this continuous cycle, of 4 years of work, and then 1 year where you're like, okay,
we're not sure what's really happening.
You're not sure. But I look at what Kigali's done, in terms of their marketing. It's incredible. I mean, you would think Rwanda's the only country in the world with gorillas.
I know.
But it's the way they've told the story.
Ellen,
they've owned it.
Ellen came here, saw giraffes, didn't even really talk about it. But this was just a bypass while she's headed to Kigali. Yeah.
And so, I think the marketing around tourism needs to be a lot more professional. It needs to be a lot more targeted. We need to tell our story, and we need to tell it well, because we do have a fantastic product in tourism. We really, really do. We have an incredible, you can't compare it to lots of places. You look at
beaches,
the sun, the safaris, the animals, literally everything.
Yep.
If you go to a country like Nigeria, there's no tourism there. Why can't we make it easier for Africans to travel within the continent?
Or even Kenyans to travel within Kenya. I'm glad that's sort of happening within Kenya.
It is now a lot. Yeah. COVID has forced that to happen. But I think, why can't we make tourism easy for Africans to come to? Why is it so difficult? I don't get it. I don't know how many visas people need to travel. If you wanted to travel around Africa, I think you need something like 34 visas. It's insane. And yet, just the African market alone is huge. So we should really be tapping into it. And I hope that, we will be able to see the sense in doing that.
With all your wisdom, and we're coming to a close, just maybe two more questions. And all your experience within the industry over the years, firstly, what advice would you have for the younger people? And then also another follow-up question is probably, how has digital affected PR going forward?
So I think for me, I'm very, and people who might see this as old school, I do think it's important to get some experience being an employee before you're an employer. And I can't fault the years that I was an employee. The structure, the discipline, the policies, everything, really gave me a wonderful foundation for when I had my own business and I could grow a brand. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't spent my years at Barclays. And like I said at the beginning, being in somebody else's business is the best way, because you can make mistakes, but you're not paying for them. You're in somebody else's business, and so you can do all these things, but it's not going to affect your bottom line because it's not your business. And I know it's not that easy anymore. It's not easy for people to get jobs. So a lot of people are becoming self-employed out of necessity. But I think my advice would be, if it is possible, look for a job. Get experience in somebody else's business.
Yep.
Digital. That was a revolution. Complete revolution. We had to change everything. Suddenly, responding just before the newspapers went to bed wasn't adequate, because that's what we used to do. Be like, it's just, by 4 we'll give them a response.
We're good.
Yeah. You can't do that anymore. Like, honestly, you have to be, it's 24/7, and you have to be responsive. And also, there's so many people that are telling your story.
Oh, there's so many people that are telling your story.
So many people are telling your story. So, you don't even own your own story anymore. And that is a huge challenge because, if you don't have constant content yourself, then somebody else is going to be creating that content. So for me, I think that area of us realizing that suddenly everybody's a journalist because he has a phone, we need to get that. We're not just looking at the media. We're looking at the Richards, the Derricks, everybody, because you're a journalist just by having that Twitter account. So you're able to tell a brand story. And I think for me, that I don't think a lot of businesses have grasped that yet. So I don't know how many people even have a digital policy. And it is critical. It's so important. And just like we talked about crisis communications, before, that's the thing we would now insist on. It's like, so what's your digital policy? And they'll be like, no, we're not really those online guys. I'm like, no, actually you are. You might not think you are, but you are. And when it happens, you're going to, you need to have one. So I think, we need to embrace it. It's not going away. And we need to be ahead of the pack. So if my clients would need to have that digital policy in place. And if they're not, then they're shortchanging themselves because, reputational damage, once it's done, it's very, very hard. So I'm a big person for embracing what is inevitably here. And also and looking outside of mainstream, because how many of us actually read a newspaper anymore? And how many of us actually sit down to watch the news? It's changed, and
even
we need to change.
This is being watched on digital.
Exactly. So we really need to be part of that, and I think the PR industry needs to lead the way, and that will happen. I think there's so many young people that are in the industry now, but there's a concern that I have that there's a lot of young people in the industry without experience. And I think just trying to find that holistic sort of person that has some experience, but is young enough to realize what is selling and what content should look like. So I'm excited to watch the future of PR. And I feel very proud and very satisfied with the foundation that we managed to lay for the PR industry. But I do think it was just that. I think it was a foundation. And I'm just excited to see where it goes.
I have to say, on behalf, I think I'm the tail end of the people who have passed through the Gina Din Corporate Communication. And I am extremely grateful for what that time did to me in terms of opening up my mind, in terms of connecting with different people. And I'm just at the tail end of a list of a lot of people. Even there are people who have interviewed in this CTA. I've had conversations with Zahida, who passed through you, who is so grateful for what you did. I've had conversations with Dave Mureithi. He did a CTA and talked about you. And those are just a few of the people who have named. This, I promise, is my second last question. Okay. And now looking back from the end of, not the end of your story, but the end of this chapter, what can you say working with people has done for you?
It's been wonderful. I mean, I never saw it as my business people. I just would see it as my people, my family. And I just found that the Zahidas, the David Murithis, everybody that came through the doors never left. They might have left physically, but they never left emotionally. And I think for me, that has been wonderful, because what my team and the various teams gave me is a sense of realizing that a business isn't about your balance sheets. It isn't about the bricks and mortar. It's about the feeling. And I think, we created a feeling of inclusion, a feeling of family. And I think that's something that I hope I left behind in people, is that they'll always belong to me. They might go and work anywhere else. But you know what? They're in my heart, and so I see that in my children as well. Is that's how they are? How they interact as well. But it's building a business that wasn't about growth. It wasn't about the brand. It wasn't. It was about the feeling. And I think I'm so grateful that I was able to create a sense of family in my business.
Do you feel successful in that?
I feel very successful.
When you write down what your successes are, does that play a part?
When it comes to people and legacy, I am totally at peace, because I know that I've created so many people in this industry, who will go on to do incredible things, who will go on to be internationally known. And I'm so proud that even if it was a tiny little seed I planted in their heads, that I was part of that journey. And I see it. I'm proud of them every single day. I look at them and I'm like, wow. I mean, today, talk about Zahida. I found a picture today of Zahida with little Nathan at the races. And Nathan's not looking at all impressed. But I'm looking at and just saying, wow, you know, she's a success story. And I'm very proud of her. And there are many like that.
Yep. In fact, at this moment, I've got to give a big shout out to Caroline Mtoko, because if it wasn't for Caroline, I don't think I'd be sitting here with you. She played a huge role in us connecting, and I think it's important that I just put that out there.
Caroline, and I love Caroline. You know, they're just, you know, there's. I think if you live in a space of love, life is so much easier. You know, and I think that's just the space that I live in. It's just that I have a lot of love, and. You know, and that love's come back to me in millions of ways. You know, I have people that, I mean, out of the blue, I'll get a bunch of flowers from somebody, and it'll be from a random, you know, employee. Just thinking of you today, boss. You know, like there's so much love that has come out of my brand.
And that's because you give love.
And it's because we created a space where people were loved.
I've got to ask this. I've got 2 daughters, so for me, the woman conversation is so. Part of the reason why I'm like, I have to get women to be on this channel is because I want my daughters to be able to see, aside from seeing my wife and maybe their grandmom, I want them to be able to hear and see success stories and know that it is possible. So if you're speaking to young girls out there, women in corporate Kenya, what is it, Gina, you've been able to maintain this the feminine side of you and yet still rise to the top in what I call a man's world.
I've had to gate crash. I'm a professional gate crasher. I always say that. I'm a professional gate crasher. I sat at many tables where I wasn't invited. You know, I would just take my seat and sit. I think it's easier now. I think more women are getting invited to the conversation. But I think a lot of it is knowing that you can. And I think that's what I'd say to the young women and to young girls is know that you can.
Give me a story of when you get crashed.
I mean, I've done it all my life. I mean, we would be here for another 2 hours.
Just
if I've told you. Many, where I'm just like, hey, oh, you're talking about this? No, I've got something to add. I mean, it would happen to me all the time at the bank. You know, I'd be like, oh, so you're talking about this? No, I think I have something.
Okay.
And they'd look at me and saying, but, you know, like you weren't invited to this meeting. I'm like, no. I'm just coming, you know. So I would make sure that I was always at the table, and I had to force myself many times. But I think it's also like young girls knowing that it's important to be independent, financially independent. I think that's very important. And to do that, they're going to have to do something with their lives, and that they can do that, and that they can follow. I mean, I think for me, when I realized what my brand evolved to, was that I never dreamt big enough, because I never thought it would be that big. You know, so I kind of figured I'd have 1 or 2 employees, a couple of clients, you know, comfortable, you see my kids a lot. That was my dream, and it became like way bigger. So I think we need to dream big, and if there's one thing that I didn't do was to dream big enough. And I think, you know, it's actually knowing that we can achieve whatever we set out to achieve and more. I think for girls, it really is important to be a gate crasher.
I love what you're saying. On this platform, CTA, it's extremely difficult for me to get women. I'll be honest. And a lot of
I'm sure it is. I can understand that. I mean, even when I would interview for jobs, I would find it very interesting that if there was a male and a female candidate, that the male would be able to sell himself better. He would talk about what he'd achieved. He would take ownership for his success stories. And women would be, I was part of a team, we managed to do this, you know, and I'd be like, no, but what role did you play? And I do think that is an issue where women are still not able to articulate their successes well enough. And I think that is something that we need to put our hand up and say, actually, I was responsible for that. You know, I mean, I brought this to the table, I added that value. We must. Because who's going to tell that story for us? You know, and I think and that for me, and I actually used to see it a lot in my business. Like the guy would say, so because of me, this policy was brought, blah blah blah, and the woman would say, yeah, so the team I was on, so it would always be she would be the weaker candidate until I would actually force it out of her, and then realize actually
she did the
damn thing herself, and I wanted her to be proud of what she did. So I think that for me is we still have a little ways to go for women. But I think it's important that we are able to tell our story and articulate our successes and own that space.
No matter what level of success that it may be.
It could be, you could be my house help. They've helped me today to make sure that, we're able to do this. That's, so it doesn't matter what it is, but we need to take credit for that. And we need to be unapologetic about it. So that's what I would say.
All I'm going to ask you to do is just do a parting shot. Thank you so much, Gina, for the opportunity, the wisdom, everything that you have shared. Thank you so much for your journey again. I'll keep saying this, and this one is from my heart. Thank you for the journey that you have walked, because people like me are then able to go and grab that baton and continue it, and not just me and
But you know what I'm going to say about the relay? I will say this, is that you have to be fast enough to get it. Because if you're not, we're all going to fail. So when I'm passing on the baton, you need to be fast enough to get it and run. Otherwise, the whole team is going to fail. And that's what I say to women, that yes, we're passing on, there's a relay, but I'm not waiting for anybody. If you don't catch it,
I'll keep running.
And so I think that's what I'd say, is that, we will all fail if we're not fast enough in this game.
Oh, that's a powerful parting shot. Thank you so much. God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you to Captain for just allowing us to be here.
Thank you for coming. And thank you for the honor and the privilege.
And cut.